Welcome to another Fantasy Goodfellas video where we talk about the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 7. You ready?
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
Rolling on the field.
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
All right, before we get started, let me remind you that these predictions is compiled with a lot of different writers. So this is not necessarily my predictions, but I like to comment about their predictions and then also have some thoughts and look at some stats and trends. All right, let's just get started. At number 1, you have Tyreek Hill at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is going to be a fantastic game because the Philadelphia Eagles defense is good, their offense is good, but this is Tyreek Hill we're talking about, one of the best receivers in the game today. But I definitely want to look at his bar chart. And by looking at the receiving yards, it was the first time this season that he had back-to-back games where he had over 160 yards. TD-wise, again, he's scored almost every week. So this will be an interesting matchup going against the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you got Tyreek Hill, you're playing him. At number 2, Cooper Kupp, home versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Cooper Kupp finally came back, and when you drafted him so high, he's finally paying dividends. He was the second best wide receiver in week 2. In week 6, he was the second base. But I just want to take a look at we knew this was going to happen, right? Cooper Kupp was going to come back, but it was going to affect the other wide receivers on this team. So look, 7 catches for 148 yards, but you got Puka Nacua was on that team, and now he is starting to trend downward. And I don't think he made the top 30. So that's how having Cooper Kupp back helps, but all of a sudden it affects somebody else. But it's Cooper Kupp. You're playing him. At number 3, Stephon Diggs at the New England Patriots. Now, Stephon Diggs had 100 receiving yards but didn't score a touchdown. That put him as the 20th ranked wide receiver. And if we look overall, I always like to see where do they trend. So he's been in the top 30 or top 20, 5 out of the 6 weeks. So you got Stephon Diggs. You're going to keep playing him. But he's going against the New England Patriots, which isn't a good defense. So I have no problem seeing him ranked so high. At number 4, you have A.J. Brown versus the Miami Dolphins. And again, I think the thing about both these teams is they can run. And that's what's going to pan out, right? You got Jalen Hurts can score a touchdown. You get 47 yards on the ground. You got DeAndre Swift, Gainwell, and Scott. So they've used 4 running backs if you include the quarterback in there. Now you're expecting A.J. Brown to go against the Dolphins. So I think, again, it's either Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown. Depends where you go. I think you can focus on A.J. Brown. I'll be surprised if he's the wide receiver that comes out on top. At number 5, Keenan Allen at the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Keenan Allen had 85 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. If we look at that team overall, Justin Herbert threw 2 TDs, and one was to Gerald Everett and one was to Keenan Allen. I think if you're a Herbert or a Keenan Allen, you like to see a little bit more production and a few more TDs towards your wide receivers, which I'm not shocked, but it might not happen. And at number 6, you have Davante Adams at the Chicago Bears. Well, I think the one thing about Davante Adams is this was not his good game. They did talk about having a tight end being more involved, and then that's where you can see Michael Mayer was involved. But if you look back at the wide receivers, it was Jacoby Myers who had the receiving touchdown instead of Davante Adams. But again, it's Davante Adams, so sometimes you're going to have to roll with him regardless. At number 7, Amon-Ra St. Brown at the Baltimore Ravens. Amon-Ra St. Brown is having a spectacular season. I think that's where you have Jared Goff as the quarterback, who's kind of been pretty consistent, but that team's been well balanced. And if we want to look at this is let's look at his yards, because sometimes it's produced by TDs and yardage. So he's got 13. Remember, this is standard scoring. He scored 10 points or more in 5 of the 6 weeks. So Amon-Ra St. Brown got into the end zone. I expect him to do well again this week, because that Detroit Lions team is feeling a lot more confident. At number 8, Puka Nacua, home versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this is where I tend to fall apart in my belief that you're going to have 2 wide receivers in the top 10 from one team, the Los Angeles Rams. I don't expect it to happen. And I think this is where you have to kind of decide, are you going to put Puka Nacua in your lineup or are you not? And let's just look at the rankings. I think Cooper Kupp came back last week, it happened, right, in week 5. But in week 6, all of a sudden he disappeared from the top 30. Didn't get that production. Now all of a sudden, Cooper Kupp's back. They're going to be looking for Cooper Kupp much more. And it's hard for me to see 2 wide receivers in the top 10. If I was a Puka Nacua owner, you got to start looking at some of the bench players to see if you can get somebody who's hot. At number 9, Deebo Samuel at the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Deebo Samuel might have gotten hurt. I'm just looking at these stats right there, and he might have gotten hurt or exited the game. So he had 1 target, no receptions, and 11 rushing yards. That's not going to cut it for Deebo Samuel. And even I think they had a bad game. I think they lost that game. And that's what's going to happen when you have a young quarterback. Sometimes it's just not going to work out like that. And that was one. I expect that team to bounce back. I expect everybody to kind of get going again. And I think McCaffrey's injured, so pay attention to that when we do our injury reports. But Deebo Samuel, I think that's where you're having a big name and you're dependent on him. So this predictions is kind of what your belief. They're name brand wide receivers. And we saw last week 16 made the top 30 and 14 didn't. So who's not going to make it? That's what we're talking about, though. At number 10, Mike Evans, home versus the Atlanta Falcons. Mike Evans, he did not make the top 30. He only had 49 receiving yards. And if we look at how he's trending, it seems to be his week 2 was his best week, and now we're kind of flatlining and again or going down. So that's something to pay attention to. And if you look at your yardage versus your points, it kind of follows suit. At number 11, moving up until, in my opinion, it's the second tier. You have DJ Moore, home versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, all of a sudden now, Justin Fields is injured. And how does that play into it? Well, I can tell you one thing. You're not going to have a running quarterback per se. So that's going to help the receivers because now you have to have a better game plan. Does that mean that the Foreman, Evans, and Blassen game is going to do well? I don't know. But I expect DJ Moore to be targeted, and he's going to have a good game. It's going to be hard to see some production from Chicago when you have a different quarterback in there. At number 12, DK Metcalf, home versus the Arizona Cardinals. DK Metcalf, again, this team, the Seattle Seahawks team, is very questionable. I mean, they have Geno Smith, who had a lot of yards with 323 yards, 20 rushing yards, but no TDs. And if you look at this team overall, they had 1 TD as an entire team. That's not what you expect from DK Metcalf, not what you expect from Geno Smith. And they're going against the Arizona Cardinals, but they are playing at home. So I expect DK Metcalf to bounce back. Don't have a problem, but it's DK Metcalf. You're going to play him. At number 13, Brandon Ayuk at the Minnesota Vikings. This is where, again, putting 2 wide receivers in the top 30 from the one team who had an off week is always shocking to me. They're going to have to pass it more if McCaffrey doesn't play. So I kind of don't care about this, but Ayuk does more than just receive. they get some rushing yards, and I think that's going to play into this a little bit too, because Ayuk can run and Samuel can run, but it is San Francisco, and that offense is pretty good. At number 14, Jalen Waddle at the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Waddle got into the end zone. It seems Waddle is getting more involved into that offense. If we look at his bar chart for receiving yards, it seems like the production's kind of low. You expect a lot more with Waddle. But if you look at his TDs, he's starting to get into the end zone. And if you look at his points, it's picking up a little bit. So I expect Waddle to have another good game. It seems like they're finding ways to get Waddle involved. At number 15, you got Calvin Ridley at the New Orleans Saints. Calvin Ridley had an off game. It looks like it was the ETN show. And if you look at ETN, he had 2 TDs, 55 rushing yards, 28 in the air. But that seems to be how that played out. It was more of a running game, ETN. But we expect Ridley to be more involved. They're going against the New Orleans Saints. I expect him to have a bounce-back game. At number 16, you got Chris Olave versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, seems to be some quarterback issues, right? So you got 96 receiving yards, not too bad. You got it. If it's in standard scoring, you're getting some production there. But Derek Carr, 353 yards and a touchdown. I think I might have made a mistake because I thought Winston was on the sidelines and Kamara didn't want to hear him. But Kamara had a pretty good game, and Derek Carr threw for 353 and a touchdown, but it didn't go to Chris Olave. But 96 yards, that's decent. That's production. And if you got 30 teams and 3 wide receivers on every team, that's over. You need him to be in the top 30, and he was. At number 17, you have Christian Watson at the Denver Broncos. Now, if you look at Christian Watson here, let's got to go back a little bit to see some. He had 91 receiving yards in week 5, and week 4 he had a touchdown. But if we look at his bar chart, let's get back. It seems like he's banged up. We're gonna have to. He's questionable in the season. I think that game was a little bit better, but we expect Christian Watson to do more. I don't know. I got to make sure these players ain't on bye. But anyways, Christian Watson hasn't been too much of a factor all season. So if I was a Christian Watson owner, I'd be questionable. But the thing about it is, guys, and I'm going to say this, they are going against the Denver Broncos, one of the worst teams in the league. So if you're a fantasy owner and you see Denver Broncos in your lineup or in your matchup, you got to roll with it. At number 18, George Pickens at the Los Angeles Rams. George Pickens, if we got to look at his bar chart to see how he's doing on the season. They might have not have played this weekend, and that's what it looks like there. Is he's a good wide receiver. He gets involved, but let me go back to him. Let's just see how many times he was in the top 30 this season, and he was in the top 32. It looks like that 236 rankings, that doesn't include bye. But that's George Pickens. I would say he's the best receiver on that team. At number 19, Marquez Brown at the Seattle Seahawks. Marquez Brown had 34 receiving yards. It looked like that was an off game. Only 235 passing yards on 41 attempts. You get that many attempts, you should be a lot higher in the yardage. So if you're a Dobbs owner, that's good. But if you're a wide receiver owner, you got to be questioning if you can count on Marquez Brown. And you got Rondell Moore, and that is the snapshot of how that team did. At number 20, Tyler Lockett versus the Arizona Cardinals. Tyler Lockett had 94 receiving yards, got into the top 30. You got to depend on him. He's doing better than Metcalf. At number 21, You have Jacoby Myers at the Chicago Bears. Without Justin Fields, they might have to throw it more, might give a little bit more offense to the Las Vegas Raiders. I expect Myers to have a good game. Number 22, Devonta Smith versus the Miami Dolphins. And I think here is it's either going to be the A.J. Brown show or the Devonta Smith show. And I would have to go and say I think both wide receivers can get into that top 30. Number 23, you have Zay Flowers, home versus Detroit Lions. Zay Flowers got into the end zone, and he was good for 13. But the question is, can he score again? He's not going to get that many targets. He got 8 targets for 50 receiving yards. When you see Zay Flowers, the question is, can he get in the end zone? At number 24, you have Amari Cooper at the Indianapolis Colts, and the defense showed up for the Cleveland Browns. He had 108 receiving yards, but if you're like me, I'm not paying attention to every team, every game. But you have P.J. Walker for 192 yards. Looks like Cooper did the best, and I just don't know. If Watson's not going to play, it's questionable all around. Pay attention if Watson plays. If Watson plays, you shouldn't expect that. But Cooper, 4 catches, 108 yards. Not sure that can be reproduced with PJ. At number 25, Christian Kirk at the New Orleans Saints. Again, 2 wide receivers from a team. I always get questionable, right? I always question this. But Christian Kirk got into the end zone, 49 receiving yards. You take a look at this. You have Christian Kirk got into the end zone. That's why he broke into that top 30. If he didn't, he would be out of it. But he's going against the New Orleans Saints. I think that could be, you could see both wide receivers for Jacksonville in the top 30. Number 26, Terry McLaurin at the New York Giants. Now, this is a team that I think you got to be pretty stoked if you have any player on the Washington Redskins offense. And the reason why is Sam Howell seems to be doing very well. He didn't get a lot of receiving yards, but 3 touchdowns, that's really good. And I think that you got a reception touchdown with Robinson, Gibson, and Samuel. And I think that's where you got to be super stoked. Now you're going against the New York Giants. Don't know if the quarterback's going to start, but if you got anybody on the Washington Redskins, I like what they're doing, and I think you can depend on them this week. At number 27, Jordan Addison versus the San Francisco 49ers. Some people commented that, oh, Addison, are you kidding me? You should be higher with Addison on your rankings now that Justin Jefferson isn't playing. Look, he had 28 receiving yards. He did get into the end zone. But you're talking about 5 targets, 3 receptions. Yes, he got into the top 30. But that's no way that you can be commenting on my video that says, oh, Addison, where's Addison? He didn't do it that week. I hope you expect him to show up this week. But barely making the top 30 is no way be bragging in the comments section or questioning me about where he is in this predictions. At number 28, Chris Godwin versus the Atlanta Falcons. Now, 77 receiving yards, just barely made the top 30. And what I like to do is to think, if you're in a 16-team league and you start 2 wide receivers, that's 32 wide receivers. Chris Godwin deserved to be in the lineup. And I think that's where you're looking at for the all season. This is his production. This is his TDs. No TDs this year. And that is shocking. And his points, very low points. So this is all yardage based. That's not cutting it. But he did get into the top 32, and he deserves to start. At number 29, Gabe Davis at the New England Patriots. Boy, do I like this, right? You got 21 receiving yards. Did not make the top 30, but it's Gabe Davis. How he did on the entire season so far is he was 1, 2, Three of the 6, he was not in the top 30. But it's Gabe Davis. Now you're going against the New England Patriots that does not have a good defense. He deserves to get your start. At number 30, Jerry Jeudy, home versus the Green Bay Packers. Now Jerry Jeudy had 14 receiving yards. He was targeted 5 times. But let's just take a look at what that offense did. Russell Wilson, 95 yards. That is terrible. And they're going against their home. Let's help. But the defense is killing them. And Russell Wilson was having a good season, but that was not good for week 6. But you're talking about Jerry Jeudy, one of the stars, wide receivers on that time. You got Sutton and Jeudy, so I think he can kind of get in there. All right, that is the stats and graphs for the top 30 wide receiver predictions for week 7. I hope you find this video helpful with making some decisions on your lineups. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. All right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
Those fantasy good fellas.
Rolling on the field.
Those fantasy good fellas.